She was 12 the day the market woman called her a demon. 12. And already the secret teacher of a billionaire's daughter she hadn't met yet. The insult hit like a stone, but the twist would come later. For now the only audience was a gutter, a crowd of strangers, and a mother who was clapping at invisible birds. "Dirty thing! Leave here!" the woman spat, sloshing soapy water that stopped an inch from Shalola's bare feet. Around them, Mile 12 roared, haggling voices, bus horns, the rattle of cartwheels bulldozing puddles into smaller sorrows. Shalola didn't flinch. She'd learned the economy of stillness. If you don't move, they finish shouting sooner. She tightened her grip on her mother's wrist. "Mommy," she whispered, "sit, please." Abini laughed up at the sky. "They took my wings," she told the clouds, voice sing-song and bright as a broken bottle. "I left them in the boot of a car." "Keep them safe, Mommy," Shalola said softly, tugging the wrapper higher over her mother's shoulder, hiding scars the world liked to read like gossip. "We'll fetch them later." No one stopped to help. Some slowed to stare, then hurried on with that guilty speed of the almost kind. Shalola was used to it. Daughter of a madwoman, gutter girl, cursed child. Names were flies. She'd been bitten so many times her skin had learned to heal without complaint. Hunger, though, that was a different beast. It coiled low in her belly and made a small, angry sound. Across the road, a schoolgirl in a crisp uniform pointed, whispered to a friend, and giggled. The laughter burned like pepper in a cut. Shalola looked down at herself. Dust-gray legs, knees crowded with old bruises, a dress that had learned every color of rain. She pressed her lips together and reached into her nylon bag to count their wealth. 110 naira note, 3 coins, a blunt pencil, and a crumpled flyer she saved because the back was still blank. She had never owned a proper notebook of her own, not since the day the woman who'd paid her fees vanished to a country Shalola pictured as endless sky. "You can't stay here!" the market woman barked again, louder this time for the benefit of the crowd. "Go and beg somewhere else. The smell is chasing customers." "My mother's tired," Shalola said, not lifting her eyes. The sentence felt like a small umbrella in a hurricane. The woman hissed, "Madwoman Pekin, are we the ones to cure her?" "No," Shalola thought, "not you, not any of you." A truck thundered by in a tantrum of smoke. Someone's hand brushed her shoulder, and she tensed before she realized it was a child swerving around her to buy plantains. By afternoon, the sky wore the heavy face of rain. When the first fat drops hit, some stalls drew their tarps. Others simply gave up the day. Water found the quick paths it always found, down cracked concrete, through rubbish heaps, across bare feet. Abini clapped at the storm, delighted. "Angel bath!" she cried. "Shh," said Shalola, though she was smiling despite herself. She had learned to take joy in the cheap moments. A sudden breeze, a ray of light slipping through cloud, the exact green of a mango leaf above a wall she wasn't allowed to climb. When the rain gentled to a mutter, she led her mother beneath the bend in a billboard that had half unpeeled from its frame. The ad woman smiled forever at nothing. Beneath that smile, they shared a crust someone had tossed and a drink from the public tap that tasted like coins. Night stretched itself like a tired cat. The city's noise changed key. Less bargaining, more laughter with edges, engines blurting curses, music bleeding from rooms that forgot the gate was open. Under the billboard, her mother slept and whimpered. Shalola didn't sleep. She had a job. She smoothed the back of the crumpled flyer against the concrete and drew a line with her pencil stub. Then another. Then a 4. 2x2, sure 4. She wrote it again beneath until the numbers became a rhythm, a breath, a prayer. When the graphite tore the paper, she flipped the flyer and pressed her palm to the hole like a bandage. "God," she whispered to a star that had managed to pry apart 2 clouds, "why give me a brain like a burning lamp and shut all the doors where I could use it? If I'm not meant to learn, why do I remember every chalk mark I ever saw?" The star did what stars do, said nothing, and kept shining. Morning had the thin taste of yesterday. Her mother woke screaming at a lizard only she could see. Then came the soft apologizing that followed every storm inside her skull. By the time the sun heated the market metal to dangerous, The pair had drifted toward the road near the school with the fanciest gates, Queen's Crest, the one with windows that held the sky hostage. It wasn't on purpose. Hope has a compass of its own. From the shadow of a neem tree, Shalola watched the uniformed children spill through the gates like a river trained not to flood. She mouthed the words on their book spines as they passed. Mathematics, comprehension, science for JSS 1. Her heart didn't beat faster so much as harder, like it was knocking from the inside. She shifted her mother to a piece of wall that looked tired enough to let them lean. An older boy tripped and laughed it off. A girl dropped a pen and didn't notice. A teacher crossed the road with the air of someone late to a meeting with her own temper. And in all of it, no one saw the barefoot child measuring the distance between her life and that gate like a number problem she could solve if the world would just let her show her work. On days like this, she told herself the story of when she had belonged. A few months at a public school, Auntie Linda had wrestled from the hands of paperwork and pity. How the chalk dust had smelled like victory. How the teacher's frown had turned sideways the first time she answered what no one else could. How the headmistress had said, "Who trained this child?" And Auntie Linda had said, "Hunger." Then the visa came, and the gift shut like a hand around a coin. No fees, no school. It had been said gently, as if kindness could soften arithmetic. She could almost hear Auntie Linda now. Work hard. Keep clean what you can. God doesn't waste pain. The memory sat warm and heavy in her chest. Hungry, said her mother, dragging the word like a sack. Hungry, hungry. I know, said Shalola. Wait. She scanned her small kingdom. A curb, a post, the stretch between buses, and there, near a pile of election posters gone mushy with rain, she found a heel of bread abandoned by the day. It had collected the kinds of dirt that will not wipe off. She picked off the worst of it and broke the rest into tiny pieces, feeding them to her mother like communion. A man stopped, considered, and dropped a coin in her lap without looking at her face. It was heavier than it sounded. 50. She smiled up at him, but he was already walking away. 50. With another 50, she could buy a sachet of water and not feel like a thief when she drank. With an impossible 1,000, she could pay a fraction of school fees. Numbers were faithful. People changed their minds. A gust lifted the edge of the billboard and slapped it, whap, as if to mark the hour. Behind the school wall, a bell answered. Lessons would begin. Somewhere inside, a teacher would draw fractions, halves, quarters, eighths. She imagined the circles halved and halved again, the safety of pieces adding up the way days almost never did. If she closed her eyes, she could hear the chalk squeak in the chorus of answers. She did close her eyes. In the darkness behind them, the market noise softened and the sound of chalk grew clear. And she was there, at a desk, a real one, her name written on an exercise book that was only hers, Schola. She underlined it twice. She raised her hand. The teacher called on her, not to scold, but to ask. The circle became quarters, then eighths. She added the pieces. They obeyed. When she opened her eyes, a boy was staring at her. He wore a sweater too expensive to be comfortable. Why are you here? He asked, not meanly, simply as if asking why rain fell. To learn, she said. He looked confused. From outside? She smiled. For now. The boy shrugged and left, already forgetting the question he'd asked. Her mother began humming a lullaby that sometimes remembered its words. Sleep, my star. Not now, said Shalola, laughing quietly. I have class. She stood, brushed the dust from the back of her dress, like a lady whose pride had survived better dinners, and drifted along the wall until she found the mango tree whose shadow reached over a lower section. She had discovered it weeks ago, the place where leaves made a green hush and the yard hand never swept. If she stood on a particular root and leaned just so, she could see a slice of board through a cracked pane, and the wind would carry enough sentences to make a lesson. She climbed the root. She leaned. The world offered her a blackboard, thin as a postcard. The teacher's hand appeared like a magician's, writing, "Find the LCM." Her pencil could not keep up, so she drew circles and cut them into parts, and the parts agreed to meet where she told them to. 2/3 and 1/6, she murmured, Make them sixths. There, 3/6. From this distance, understanding was a kind of worship. She felt the old thrill slide through her like the first swallow of clean water after a long, dusty day. Knowledge entering the body, cooling what nothing else could. Hey, someone barked from the field. She stiffened, heart sprinting, but the shout wasn't for her. A boy had climbed a goalpost and been caught. The scolding moved away. She exhaled. Behind the cracked glass, the teacher turned the page. New problem, new promise. A breeze drew mango scent through the slats and touched her cheek. The tree held its shade over her like a secret. She didn't know that this corner and this hour would one day grow a friendship strong enough to bend a billionaire's heart. She didn't know that on a different afternoon, 2 black SUVs would roll through the gate like judgment and stop at this very tree, and the world would learn its best lesson under leaves. All she knew was that the circle had become quarters. The quarters had agreed to be halves, and for a few stolen minutes, the pieces of her life added up. Tomorrow, she told the tree, the wall, the quiet sliver of window. I'll come back tomorrow. The market woman was right about one thing. This wasn't a place to stay, but it was, unexpectedly, a place to begin. The first miracle of Skolola's life wore a flour-dusted apron and smelled like pepper soup. It happened on a day when the sun pressed the market flat and the air tasted of iron. A beanie sat humming to a plastic bottle as if it were a radio, and the world, busy, loud, uninterested, stepped over them. Skolola was counting the coins in her nylon bag for the 5th time, hoping multiplication might invent money, when a voice said, "Have you eaten?" She looked up into eyes that did not skitter away. The woman behind the food stand was full-bodied and steady, her jewel tied with the confidence of someone who had made peace with fire and oil. Steam curled from 2 coolers behind her. The sweet orange glow of jollof rice made its own kind of promise. "I don't have money," Shalola said quickly. "Then pay me with your name," the woman replied, already reaching for a plate. "Skolola," she whispered, surprised by how softly her own name could sound. "Good. I'm Linda. Auntie Linda, if you like." She handed over the plate. "Eat." The first bite landed like rain on dry ground. Heat, spice, salt, meat. Skolola's eyes filled despite herself. She swallowed so fast it hurt and then slowed down, because this was a thing to be respected. "Where's your mother?" Auntie Linda asked. "There," said Shalola, tilting her head toward the wall where a beanie now traced spirals on concrete. "Sometimes she sings," she added, as if apologizing for weather. Auntie Linda watched for a moment, not with pity, but with attention. "She's sick," she said softly, like a diagnosis and not a judgment. "And you? You go to school?" "I went." The word felt like a past tense too heavy for a child to carry. "2 terms. The woman who paid left." Auntie Linda's mouth made a small line that often precedes decisions. She fetched a bottle of water and a bar of laundry soap wrapped in printed paper. "Come tomorrow," she said. "You'll help me wash plates in the morning. I'll feed you. We'll see about the rest." That night beneath the billboard, stars argued with the traffic lights, and sleep crept like an untrustworthy cat. But for the first time in months, hunger did not sit on her chest like a fist. She folded the soap into her bag as if it were a certificate. At dawn, she was at the stand, bare feet on wet concrete, breath turning to steam in the early cool. Work had a rhythm that made sense. Soak, scrub, rinse, stack, wipe, sweep, carry, return. Auntie Linda watched without hovering, her eyes saying, "You can do this in a way no one had ever told her." By midday, Shalola's fingers had grown wrinkled and proud. "Eat," said Auntie Linda, sliding a plate toward her. "Then come and count with me." "Count?" "Money," the woman said, tapping the metal cash box. "You keep looking at the numbers like they're old friends." They were. 10s and 20s and 50s lined up obediently. Change became story problems. Addition made the day feel solvable. "You can read?" Auntie Linda asked, pretending to be casual. "A little," said Skolola. "From listening." "From where?" "By the fence," she admitted. "If the window's open." Auntie Linda said nothing for a long beat. Then she reached beneath the counter and set down a gift as precious as an unlocked door. A small exercise book and 2 pencils sharpened to careful points. For me? The question left her before she could stop it. For what you already are, said Auntie Linda. Write your name first so the book knows who it belongs to. She did, each letter a step further onto dry land. Scholla. She underlined it twice, the way she had in her mind the night before. Work, eat, count, learn. The days held to that holy order. The market became a classroom that smelled of smoke and tomatoes. The food stand, a kind of church. Auntie Linda did not talk about charity. She talked about rules. Come on time, keep clean what you can. If you break a plate, you confess before the floor does. And if your brain asks a question, you answer it. The headmistress at the public school 2 streets away had a voice like a cane, but she also had eyes that widened when a thin girl in a borrowed dress solved a problem before the chalk had finished writing it. Auntie Linda stood beside the desk as if she were holding up a beam in a storm. Let her try, she said, not to beg, but to argue on behalf of common sense. Fees? The headmistress asked. I will manage, said Auntie Linda. And so the gate swung, creaked, protested, then swung. And the girl who had learned under trees took her seat inside. The uniform they found for her in the thrift pile was too big in all the places that had learned smallness, but it felt like a robe anyway. Chalk dust clung to her sleeves like blessing. It turned out her mind had been waiting in a crouch. It sprang. Poems went in and stayed. Numbers lined up for inspection. Sentences, once jittery insects, marched in columns and learned to carry their own weight. She did not speak loudly, but when she was called on, she answered with the certainty of a map. A boy rolled his eyes the first week and stopped by the third. The teacher, who had thought trouble at the sight of bare ankles, began to say, Thank you, Scholla, after a correct explanation, as if gratitude were contagious. Every afternoon she ran back to the stand to work. Money did not grow because you were clever. It grew because you lifted things and your back learned discipline. Auntie Linda kept her end of the deal. Hot plates, clean water, a nod when the arithmetic in the cash box matched the day's exhaustion. Who trained this child? The headmistress asked one morning, half to herself, after a recitation that made even the chalk pause. Hunger, said Auntie Linda, tying a knot in a plastic bag. Then after a moment, as if correcting a tense, also hope. On Sundays when the market rested, but the world did not, Auntie Linda taught her other things. How to wash a dress so it lasts a week longer than it wants to. How to look people in the eye long enough to count as a person. How to walk away from boys whose jokes sounded like traps. How to hold a spoon as if you had always had one. Don't let shame tell you who you are, she said, showing her how to thread a needle. Shame is loud because it knows it's lying. Why are you helping me? Scholla asked once, the question burning a hole through gratitude. Auntie Linda shrugged, eyes on the hem she was turning. Because someone fed me once when I was small. Because God watches what we do with our full plates. Because, she looked up, smiling, you make it easy to believe the world can be repaired. The months stitched themselves together. Report cards came and were hugged till creased. The food stand grew busier. Word travels about places where a woman treats your hunger like a priority. In the evenings, they would sometimes sit on overturned buckets and watch the street cool down. Auntie Linda would tell stories in which storms always had somewhere to end. See how the day gets tired, she'd say, pointing at the pink sagging off the sky. Even trouble sleeps. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, the paper already tired from being folded and unfolded by the time it reached the stand. Auntie Linda read it once, then twice, then sat with her palms flat on the counter as if to convince the world not to tilt. What is it? Asked Scholla, sensing a change in the air and in the woman's breathing. My sister, Auntie Linda said, voice soft. After 7 years, the papers have come. I can go, the UK. It sounded like a place invented in textbooks, all straight lines and clean drains. So we're traveling? The "we" jumped out of Scholla's mouth like a child running to the gate at the sound of a horn. Auntie Linda's smile was the saddest kind, the type that tried to be a cushion for the fall it had to describe. No, child, just me. The market seemed to listen. Even the flies paused to reconsider their route. I have paid your fees to the end of term. Auntie Linda continued, practical to the last. I spoke to the head mistress. You keep your seat. Maybe, she swallowed, maybe someone else will help after. God is not done with you. The numbers on the cash box blurred. When? Said Shalola, though she already knew the answer, because good things rarely give you time to rehearse your goodbye. 3 weeks. They worked those 3 weeks like they were building something that could not blow down. They overscrubbed plates. They underslept. They laughed for longer at small jokes the way people do when time is leaving the room. On the last morning, Auntie Linda pressed the exercise book, now full at the front and back, margins colonized by small problems done for the joy of it, into her hands. Write more names in this, she said, your own on the inside. The names of things you will be: student, teacher, builder of houses that don't leak. Don't stop at one. They hugged, and Skolola felt the place under her ribs where the woman had set a lantern months ago flicker, as if bracing against wind. Then Auntie Linda was gone, and the world remembered it had other appointments. The term ended. The next began. Fees, like seasons, arrived without asking if you were ready. The headmistress' voice was kinder than the rule it carried. I am sorry, come back when… She didn't finish because arithmetic is not made of ellipses. Gate, latch, click. The sound was small, but it traveled. It went through the bones of the fence and into the girl leaning against it. It slipped into her bag and found the pencil stub. It made a round in the rooms of her chest and chose one to sit in for the afternoon. She stood outside for hours that first day, a soldier dismissed but still at attention, watching the road that did not send her a miracle twice. Children streamed past with the untroubled happiness of those whose lives have never met an invoice. Finally, the gateman said, not unkindly, go home, little one. She nodded, though the map had smudged. She walked away, though the ground argued that movement could not fix math. She did not cry in public. She had learned to keep certain weathers indoors. Under the billboard, the stars were stubborn. She opened the exercise book Auntie Linda had saved from 1,000 dirty hands and balanced it on her knees. On a blank page that felt like a dare, she wrote a sentence without looking up. When a door closes, you learn the fence by heart. Then she added another line, as if speaking to the next day. Tomorrow I will find the mango tree again. She let the pencil rest. She closed the book. She covered her mother with the wrapper and tucked the corners in with the care of a nurse. Then she lay on the concrete and listened to the city breathe and told herself the story Auntie Linda had written on her life like a signature. That compassion is a bridge, even when it doesn't reach all the way to the other side. Now there would be shadows and windows and listening through cracks. Now there would be learning without permission. But the fire had been lit. And the thing about fire is, once it knows its own name, it keeps finding fuel. The school gate learned her name and then forgot it. On the first day of the new term, Shalola stood outside until dusk, waiting for the rule to change its mind. It did not. The gateman, who had once nodded at her when she arrived early, now tilted his cap and said softly, Go home. She nodded back, as if homes were places you could return to by decision. She did not go home. She went to the place her feet still recognized, the back fence of a school that wasn't hers. Learning, she decided, would have to be stolen again. The world obliged with a map, the way it does when desperate children ask the ground for directions. There was City Crest Academy, with its gold paint that peeled in elegant curls. There was Bright Scholars, whose concrete fence had a broken tooth where a root shoved upward. And there was the richest of them all, Queen's Crest, with its green lawns and glass that reflected you back better than you were. She gave each a new name in her head. Fence 1, Crack 2, Mango 3. In the morning she tested which gatekeeper was cruel, which teacher left windows open, which tree kept secrets. In the afternoon she worked whatever work would let her hold a coin without explaining the history of her palms. At Fence 1, a classroom window tilted out like a tongue. If she stood on a stack of old blocks, she could see slashes of chalk crossing a board. She watched the teacher write subject-verb agreement and chewed the words carefully until they softened, then swallowed them whole. When the class chanted, she mouthed along, a choir of one singing in the key of almost heard. "Who's that?" a boy asked one day, seeing her shadow. "Ghost," another said with relish. "Witch," a third suggested as if trying on a coat. The teacher leaned toward the window. "Go away," she snapped into the gap. "This is not for you." Skolola did go away, from the window. She walked around the corner and leaned her ear to the wall instead. Sound is impatient. It seeps. She traced nouns and verbs in the dust with a stick, crossed them carefully, and felt that small, bright click inside when language and sense agree to sit together. At crack 2, the fence wore its wound low to the ground, a jagged mouth that had chewed on a storm and lost. Through it came times tables, the silly, stomping rhythm of numbers made into a dance so children would remember them. She did not need the song, but she took it anyway. You never know when a melody will hold you together. 3 times 4, she tapped it into her knee. 12. A small boy, brave in the way of those who will grow into tenderness if the world lets them, crawled over to peer out. "Why are you on the floor?" and he asked. "I am learning," she said. He considered the answer. "But you are not inside." "Today," she admitted, "I am a window." He liked that and told his mother that evening that the crack had become alive. The guard at Bright Scholars was not a poet. He was a man whose authority fit him badly, so he tightened it with shouting. He caught her one afternoon, fingers around her arm already forming the bruise. "Who sent you?" he demanded. "My feet," she said before she could stop her mouth from being exactly hers. He shoved her away with a scowl that didn't quite hide his confusion. "Next time I beat you?" She did not test whether the next time would be worse. She changed schedules. Hunger had taught her that perseverance is not the same as insisting on the same wall. There were good hours to learn, the minutes just after first bell, when teachers were still settling and forgot to close the window. The period before lunch, when everyone was too busy thinking of stew to surveil the margins. Rainy days when the sound of water softened discipline and words slid under eaves to find you. She cataloged them like a biologist of opportunity. The city's weather became a timetable. She kept the old exercise book in a nylon bag under her dress, and the pencil stub tucked like a secret near her ribs. When the graphite broke, she licked the lead to make it darker. When the paper tore, she stitched the rip with tape begged from a shop that liked her yes sirs. Insults gathered in drifts around her ankles. Market witch, daughter of madness, street rat. Most floated off. Some stuck. She learned to step over them the way you learn to step over puddles that are deeper than they look. There were stones too, literal ones, flung by children who had not yet been taught that the difference between a game and cruelty is consent. One struck her shin and bloomed purple. Her eyes watered, then recalculated. Pain, she decided, was a fee. She would pay it for now. In the evenings, she sold water when the woman at the kiosk would trust her with a tray. The rules were sharp. If a sachet fell, you paid. If you sat, you paid. If you returned wet from rain, you owed dryness. She kept accounts in her head so clean an auditor would have bowed. 5 naira closer to rice, 10 toward Gary, 20 toward the good soap that turns shame off your hands. She kept her mother fed and tried not to think about the days when talking to a bottle would be a luxury and not a light. Sometimes when the market had been cruel enough to bruise the day, she would walk toward Queen's Crest, not to beg, but to remember the exact shape of the thing she was after. The mango tree behind the junior block threw a generous shade, a spill of green where the sun gave up its argument with leaves. She had discovered that if she placed her foot on the thick root there and leaned, a cracked pane showed her a slice of the room the way a mercy sometimes shows you a slice of the future. Not enough to live in, enough to keep walking. She preferred this spot when the loneliness got noisy. The tree made a hush that turned humiliation into compost. It was here she trained her voice to sound like it had never been told to keep quiet. "Find the LCM," she would whisper when she heard the lesson begin, and then answer herself in the exact cadence the teacher used, teaching her mouth not to tremble. 12, she would say, and if the class inside disagreed, she reworked the problem until the numbers apologized and joined her side. When the topic wandered to comprehension, she mouthed the passage and acted it under her breath to make the meaning get up and move. She learned that good answers are not facts you memorize. They are friendships between ideas. The security man at Queen's Crest carried himself like the greenery, trimmed, watered, and sure. Twice he startled her at dusk and waved her off with a kindness that sounded like boredom. The third time he asked, "Which class?" "All of them," she said before fear could edit the truth. He scratched his jaw, hiding a smile from himself. "Then why are you outside?" "Because my body waits for fees," she said, "but my brain doesn't." He made a noise that could have belonged to a laugh. "Go," he said quietly, expecting to be obeyed. She went, and then she came back the next day like Tide inventing loyalty. Shame, Auntie Linda had told her, is loud because it knows it's lying. The market tried to make her swallow that lie daily, but there were counter voices. A tomato seller who let her rest a minute in the shadow of her umbrella without charging shade. A driver who called her sister by accident and didn't correct himself. A little girl who followed her to the crack in the fence and said, "Teach me the 9 times." Skolola traced it in dust. 9, 18, 27, rhythm tapping like a drum. The child grinned with all her teeth and ran back to tell someone you could multiply without paper. There were worse days. Days when her mother vanished into the city and returned scraped and singing. Days when the rain refused to be beautiful and wet was just cold. Days when the guard kept his threat and she had to run with the slow, awkward speed of someone protecting both a book and a soul. On those nights she lay under the billboard and told the stars a story where she always finished the lesson before the window closed. The stars listened in their unhelpful way and kept her company like older siblings who preferred silence to advice. She watched the students at Queen's Crest and learned other subjects through osmosis. The way confidence made a posture, the way polished shoes taught feet to walk like they belonged, the way laughter sounded different when hunger wasn't in the room. She mimicked what she could without stealing what she couldn't. You could practice dignity in bare feet, the mango tree approved. She made a promise to the page one evening, printing it neat so it would count. "I will not stop at knowing for myself." Under it, she added another sentence, smaller but more dangerous. "One day, I will teach." That idea warmed her like food. It turned her from a cup catching drips into a pipe carrying water. She began to explain answers to the air as if air were a student. "No, not like that. See, the denominator must match," she'd say, shaking her head the way teachers do when kindness is pretending to be annoyance. Her hands learned the choreography of explanation. Her face learned to check whether a listener had understood even when there was no listener. The wall learned fractions faster than some children inside. The first time she tried to pray this new dream, she stumbled over it as if it were an unfamiliar word. "God, let me—" She started, then stopped, not sure if asking for more made her ungrateful for what she had been given. "Let me be useful," she corrected, and the sentence felt modest enough to pass inspection. Toward the end of a long week, she arrived at Mango 3 early. The field was empty, the classroom still locked. The tree's shadow folded over her shoulders like a shawl someone remembered to bring. She leaned on the root and stared at the cracked pane, waiting for the lesson to begin. Beyond the wall, the rich day woke the way rich days do, slowly without panic. Her heart did the opposite. Without permission, it raced. She did not know why until she heard footsteps on grass behind her. Not the quick clatter of boys who still ran like puppies. Not the stiff stomp of a guard. Softer, curious, near. "You're the girl they chase away," a voice said. A girl's voice. Not sharp with cruelty, not warmed yet by pity. Observant. Skolola turned. Cornrows neat enough to draw lines with. Uniform ironed into an argument with wrinkles. A name tag that caught the light and threw it back like a dare. The girl's eyes were not the kind that skittered. They held. She looked at Sholola the way some people look at a map, as if it might lead somewhere. "I was just listening," Sholola said, the words she always used when the world asked for her permit. "Why?" the girl asked. The question was clean. It deserved a clean answer. "Because I want to learn," said Sholola, and the mango leaves above them whispered agreement, and the window caught a shard of sun, and something shifted almost imperceptibly in the gravity of the day, just enough to suggest that tomorrow might not require fences. Jessica didn't blink when Skolola said she wanted to learn. She just nodded, as if someone had finally answered a question she'd been carrying around like a heavy bag. "I'm Jessica," she said, pointing at the stitch badge on her chest even though it already told the story. The sunlight caught the plastic and turned it into a small bossy star. Do you want to sit? Skolola hesitated. Her rules were simple. Don't linger, don't be noticed, don't give the world a long enough look at you to decide you're a problem. But the mango tree's shadow felt like permission, and the girl's eyes felt like a hand held out over deep water. She sat. For a moment, they both listened to the campus breathing. Distant chatter, the clink of spoons in a faraway lunchroom, the soft snow of chalk shaken from an eraser. Jessica unlaced the top of her lunchbox. I have jollof and plantain, and a biscuit, she announced. We can share if you don't mind my germs. I don't mind, said Shalola, surprised into a smile. She had spent so long accepting crumbs that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be offered halves. They ate without ceremony, a fork passed back and forth like a treaty. When the lunchbox clicked shut, Jessica pulled out a battered math workbook. Fractions, she said, as if the word itself were a bully she'd learned to avoid. Let's see, said Shalola, setting the book on her knees. The questions glared up at her. Add 1/2 and 1/4, compare 2/3 and 3/5, find a common denominator. Familiar hills, all of them. She reached for a fallen mango leaf and tore it into 2 pieces, then 4. Look, she said, lining the pieces up on the grass. The halves are bigger than the quarters. If you want to add them, you have to speak the same language. So we turn a half into 2 quarters. Then 1/2, she touched 2 leaves, plus 1/4, another leaf, is 3/4. Your answer isn't 2 plus 1, 3 without context. It's 3 of the same kind of piece. Jessica tilted her head. So, make them match first. She bit her lip. That's it? It's that simple? Simple is not the same as easy, said Skolola. But yes. They tried another. This time Jessica tore the leaves, counted slowly, and looked up with eyes that were suddenly brighter. 3/5 is bigger than 2/5 because the pieces are the same size, but one has more of them. Yes, said Shalola, unable to stop the warmth that rose under her skin. She was proud, like a ladle that had finally found a pot to fit. And if they aren't the same, Jessica began. Make them, Shalola finished. They worked until the bell warned that the world had other plans. Jessica closed the book with both hands as if giving thanks. No one ever explained it like that, she said. They just write and write and write until I feel like I'm drowning in slashes. I used to watch lessons through a window, said Shalola, half to herself. If I didn't understand, I made the dust into paper. Dust doesn't mind being wrong a few times. Jessica digested this as if it were another kind of lesson. Come tomorrow? I shouldn't, said Shalola automatically. They chase me. Jessica's mouth set, the way rich girls' mouths do when they remember they are powerful. Wait here, she said, and sprinted across the lawn. A minute later, she returned with the security man in tow. He looked like a man who had been pulled from a routine he enjoyed. Jessica stood between them as if officiating a ceremony. This is my friend, she said, voice steady. Her name is Shalola. She sits here during lunch and helps me study. She is not to be chased. The man squinted, then searched his memory for the last instruction he'd received about this sort of thing, and found none. But she is my friend, Jessica repeated, the way people repeat truths they expect to be argued with. My father owns this school. The man's eyes did a quick math of salary versus confrontation and found the result unfavorable. He nodded once at Skolola, as if they had both agreed to pretend he had intended to be kind all along, and shuffled away. You didn't have to, Skolola began. I wanted to, Jessica said. Come tomorrow. Okay. Promise? Promise. They parted with that small, sacred word hanging between them, like a ribbon tied to a branch. The next day, Shalola came earlier. She washed her dress at the tap near the kiosk at dawn and wrung it until it stopped pretending to be a river. She combed her hair with the careful strokes her mind remembered from better days. At noon, she slipped through the gap in the fence, slid along the shade, and reached the mango tree without sounding like a stray. Jessica was already there, legs tucked under her, the workbook waiting like a child at a window. Comprehension today, Jessica said, as if naming the weather. I hate it. The passages are smug. Smug, Shalola laughed. We can make them humble. Read to me. Jessica read the first paragraph with the stiff posture of someone bracing for impact. Shalola listened with her whole face, nodding where the sentences turned, frowning where the author curled around himself like a snake. Stop, she said gently after a paragraph. Now tell me what you just read like you're telling your best friend who missed class. I don't have a best friend, Jessica said, almost whispering. You do now, said Skolola, surprising herself with how easy the sentence fit her mouth. Tell me, Jessica tried again, and this time her voice changed. Looser in the jaw, warmer in the vowels. The meaning came alive like a child coaxed out from behind a curtain. That's it, said Skolola. Comprehension isn't reading fancy. It's saying in your own words what someone else is trying to say in theirs. When you get stuck, ask what the sentence would mean if the whole world were simpler. Jessica wrote that down. Make the world simpler. Then added, ask what it means, not what it says. They kept going. Context clues, main idea, what the author implies but won't confess. When the answers shifted a millimeter to the left of obvious, Jessica learned to follow them anyway. She grinned when she got it right, groaned dramatically when she didn't, and always asked for one more example. Between exercises, the talk wandered. Jessica asked about the market and learned that hunger has many accents. Skolola asked about the mansion and learned that loneliness has marble floors. Jessica confessed that sometimes she put her head down in class and pretended to look for a pencil, just to make the room stop staring. Skolola confessed that sometimes she practiced writing numbers on her thigh under her dress, so nobody would see how badly she wanted to know them. They laughed the way sisters laugh when the world is far away, surprised, grateful, relieved to find an echo. Where's your mom? Jessica asked finally, cautious as a hand near fire. Close, said Skolola, staring toward a corner of the city where the sound of traffic grew mean at night. And also very far. She is not well. I'm sorry, Jessica said. She used to sing real word, said Skolola. Sometimes she still does. When she remembers, it's like the sun found a hole in the roof. My mom died when I was little, Jessica said. I don't remember her voice. I wish I did. They sat with that, letting the silence be useful. On the third day, Jessica brought a hairbrush wrapped in tissue paper. For you, she said, as if apologizing for not knowing what else might be needed to repair a life. It's beautiful, said Skolola, running a thumb over the smooth back. She tucked it into her bag like a secret she intended to earn. On the fourth, Jessica brought a small blue notepad. To replace the flyers, she said. On the fifth, she brought slippers, and they both laughed when Shalola kept taking them off and setting them neatly beside her, like shoes at a mosque. They will be stolen, she explained calmly. Let them be stolen from somewhere that looks like kindness. Okay, said Jessica. Then we'll keep them here under the tree. Each gift was small enough to hide, big enough to insist, you are not invisible. By the second week, Jessica's teachers had begun to mention improvement. Whatever you're doing, one said, keep doing. Jessica nodded, a private smile stored up for the mango tree. The questions in class were still fast. The answers were still slippery, but with Sholola's voice in her ear, she could feel the path beneath the panic. Don't read to impress, Sholola would whisper in memory when a comprehension passage unfurled too many clauses. Make it simple. Make them match first, her mind would remind her when fractions tried to behave like rebels. Ask what the sentence is trying to say, when meaning pretended to be shy. They made a rule of their own. No one else would know. The mango tree would keep their secret. A street girl teaching a billionaire's daughter how to read not just words but herself. Do you think your father will be angry? Shalola asked one afternoon when the wind carried the smell of roses from the headmistress's garden. About what? Jessica asked, though she knew. About me. Jessica looked at her for a long time and then shook her head as if shaking off a bad habit. He wants results, she said. If he asks how I got them, I'll tell him the truth. She paused, almost daring herself. One day, echoed Skolola, tasting the words the way you test a fruit to see if it's ripe. Later, when the lawn had emptied and the sun had moved to a kinder angle, they carved their initials near the root, small enough not to brag, deep enough to last. S plus J. The bark took the letters gently, the way the world sometimes takes a vow. Do you know, Jessica said, that when I sit in class now, I don't feel like a ghost? And when I sit here, said Skolola, I don't feel like a thief. Then we're even, Jessica grinned. No, said Shalola, smiling back. We're sisters. The bell startled them into tomorrow. They stood, brushed grass from their skirts, and packed away leaf quarters and pencil proofs as if hiding treasure from pirates. Same time? Jessica asked. Same place, said Skolola. They parted, one through the front door of privilege, one along the quiet seam in the fence. But the distance between them had become something else. Not a wall, not a wound. A bridge. Neither of them knew that bridges invite crossings. Neither knew that storms also love the places where two worlds touch. For now there was the mango tree, the hum of lessons, the give of friendship, the ridiculous happiness of being clapped for when you finally understood. For now there was a promise. They kept it. They built their days around a secret that felt both fragile and indestructible. By noon the campus belonged to noise. Laughter ringing along corridors, trays clattering, shoes scuffing manicured paths. But under the mango tree, time slowed, folded, became a small room with 2 chairs and a chalkboard only they could see. There, Jessica learned to breathe through panic. There, Shalola learned the joy of saying, try again, and watching fear become understanding. They made rituals. Jessica always opened the lunchbox like a ceremony. Rice, plantain, sometimes stew with stubborn oil that gleamed on the plastic spoon. She would split portions evenly, and if Skolola hesitated, Jessica would roll her eyes in theatrical offense, as if sharing food were not mercy but manners. In return, Shalola insisted that Jessica read the first paragraph of any passage aloud as if it were a friend she liked. If you welcome the text, she said, it sometimes behaves. On the second week, Jessica arrived flushed with triumph. I answered 3 questions in class, she blurted before sitting, out loud. How did it feel? Like stealing back my own name. She grinned. When the room went quiet, I thought I had made a mistake. But the teacher smiled. She said, good, Jessica. No one has said good to me without sounding surprised in so long. You earned it, said Shalola. Keep earning it. They practiced endings in comprehension, how authors turn corners, how summary is not just a shorter version, but a truer one. They drilled the multiplication tables Jessica had evaded since primary 3. Not by rote alone, but with stories. 3 times 4 is 12, said Skolola, arranging mango leaves. Think of it as 3 groups of 4 seeds. Count 1 group, 2, 3, 12. Your brain loves groups. My brain loves you, Jessica retorted, then groaned at her own cheesiness and fell into laughter that shook leaves down like applause. Gifts appeared, then rules to handle them. Jessica brought a set of pencils with erasers shaped like stars. 1 a week, decreed Skolola, so we don't make the tree jealous. A small bottle of lotion for scraped knuckles. A ribbon for hair. The slippers remained under the tree, tucked into a hollow root like a tiny room rented to hope. Whenever Skolola put them on, she walked in a slow circle and then removed them again, polished and patient. They will be stolen, she would say. Let them be stolen by the future. Then the future had better not try me, Jessica muttered. But she left the slippers hidden, honoring the law of the world beyond the fence, even if she planned to change it. They also traded less visible things. Jessica taught posture, how to square shoulders without aggression, how to meet a gaze without challenge. Pretend you're wearing a crown, she said, balancing an invisible circle over Skolola's head. Not the kind that says I'm better, the kind that says I belong. Ah, said Shalola, a crown that is not a threat, just a fact. Exactly. In return, Shalola taught an economy of attention, how to locate a main idea when the passage tried to flirt with detail, how to ignore a noisy sentence until it apologized for showing off. Look for the sentence without a costume, she said. That's the truth. They practiced until the rules sank beneath the skin. Make the pieces match. Ask what the sentence is trying to do. If you cannot see the path, explain aloud as if to a child. Simplicity first, polish later. Between exercises, they spoke in the language of sisters. Jessica described the mansion at dusk, when the light turned gold and even the tableware felt gentle. How the staff loved tidy predictability, and how she could never give it to them without dropping something. How silence roared in marble halls. Sometimes it feels like living inside a hotel that knows my name, she confessed. But I never made a dent in it. Then make dents, said Skolola. Small ones at first, then they'll become rooms. Skolola described the billboard that sagged like a tired smile, the corner where the rain always pooled, the stray dog who had decided they did not exist unless they carried bread. She spoke of nights when fear patrolled like a soldier, and mornings when the city forgot it had frightened her and offered her a sunrise as apology. She mentioned her mother less often, not because she was ashamed, but because grief came with a floodgate, and the tree had already promised to hold so much. One afternoon, Jessica ventured it. Do you think your mom will ever come back? Not physically, she faltered. I mean her. She visits sometime, said Skolola, voice careful. Her eyes clear, and a sentence remembers how to end. Then the fog comes again, and we wait. I think of those clear minutes as postcards. Proof she is still somewhere. I wish I could send you a stamp, Jessica whispered. You already are, said Skolola, tapping the workbook. This is postage. Learning carries messages from one life to another. The mango tree seemed to approve, dragging a lace of light across their pages as the leaves moved. Outside their shade, the campus performed its daily ballet. Bells, whistles, drifting clicks that arranged themselves like constellations. Under the tree, two girls remapped a sky. Teachers noticed. Impressive reading, Jessica, one said, baffled by how comprehension answers had shifted from guesswork to guidance. And your arithmetic, much improved. Jessica took the praise like a new balance she was learning to walk in. Delighted, shaky, adjusting. She kept their secret as a kind of liturgy, a glance through the window at lunchtime, a note in the margin that only she and the mango tree understood. Do you want to be a teacher? She blurted one day after a clean session where fractions had lined up and saluted. I want to be someone who makes rooms where understanding feels at home, said Skolola. A teacher, an architect of sentences and buildings, a builder of houses that do not leak on children who are trying to read. I don't know the word for it yet. It sounds like two words, said Jessica. Teacher and architect. Then I will learn both languages, said Skolola. They made vows without knowing they were vows. If you ever get a scholarship and leave, Jessica said, write me from wherever you land. If you ever go to a summer camp where everyone is rich and terrible, said Skolola, hide a book in your bag and call me at midnight. When you stand in front of a class, Jessica added, remember the leaves. When you decorate your first home, said Skolola, leave one wall empty for a tree. I will, said Jessica. I will, said Skolola. They practiced daring each other to be the person the other already saw. The world signaled back. One Friday, the principal stopped Jessica in the hallway. Your essays, she said, tapping a folder. Who is helping you? A tutor? Jessica's mouth went dry. Lying to adults made her tongue clumsy. Telling the truth made her father appear like thunder. She sidestepped. Someone kind, she said. Someone who knows how to explain. The principal moved on, leaving the question like a stone in water, still visible beneath the surface. That afternoon under the tree, Jessica worried the problem like a loose tooth. Maybe I should tell him, she said. My dad. He should meet you. No, said Skolola, soft but firm. Not yet. Why not? Because power does not like surprises, said Skolola. He is a big man. Big men like order. We will give him order first. Your grades, your calm, your reasons. And then we will show him where they came from. If you show him too early, he will think of rules before hearts. Jessica stared. You talk like a lawyer. I talk like someone who has watched Gates, said Skolola. Gates have tempers. They compromised. Not now, not never. When I can explain without shaking, said Jessica, when he can hear without calculating. Then we will invite him, said Skolola, smiling, to the shade. Days lengthened and then shortened, and then lengthened again. They learned each other's small habits. How Jessica counted under her breath by tapping thumb to finger. How Shalola tilted her head when a sentence was almost making sense. How both of them flinched at sudden noises and then laughed because flinching together made it smaller. When the first report card of the term arrived, Jessica brought it to the tree before she took it home. Look, B's where there had been C's, an A in English that glowed like a surprise party. Remarks that read shows improved grasp and growing confidence. You did this, Jessica said, eyes glassy. We did this, said Skolola. You did the reading. I did the reminding. Then share the biscuit, Jessica declared, thrusting it into her hand. They split it and ate in deliberate silence like a communion. The storm warnings came as little things. A new guard patrolling with overeager purpose. A teacher curious about lunch breaks. A classmate who followed Jessica one day and peeled away when he saw the tree, frowning as if he'd bumped into a different story than the one gossip had sold him. At night, the city hummed like a kettle about to boil. Under the billboard, Shalola wrote sentences she could live in if everything collapsed. I am not a thief, I am a student. And beneath it, I am not a charity, I am a promise. The day before the storm, they stayed later than usual, the air sweet with a kind of tired that felt like good work completed. Jessica lay on the grass and looked up through leaves at a sky busy with birds on their way home. Do you ever feel like we made this up? She asked. Like this place isn't real, just a story we told ourselves because we were lonely? If it were a story, it would not be heavy enough to hold us, said Skolola, patting the ground. See? It holds. Said Jessica. Maybe that's what family is. A place that holds. Then we are family, said Shalola. Jessica turned her head. We are, she agreed. My sister. The word landed and stayed. They carved it next to their initials. Sisters. The bark accepted it with a small sigh. The bell startled them into gathering their things. Jessica brushed off her skirt and tucked the report card into her bag like a bird into a nest. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow, said Shalola. They did not see the convoy of black SUVs turn into the lane beyond the admin block. They did not see the principal's urgent walk become a practiced smile. They did not see a man in white linen step out and scan the grounds the way a general checks a map. They did not see power arrive. They only knew they had kept their promise again, and that promises make patterns. The pattern would hold until it didn't. Power arrived the next day like weather, announced by a pressure change before anyone looked up to name it. Jessica felt it first as a prickle on the back of her neck. The campus had its usual noon music, clinking plates, laughter braided through the clatter. But underneath ran a hush, as if the ground had lowered its voice. She glanced toward the admin block and saw them. Black SUVs sliding through the gate with the authority of punctuation marks at the end of a long sentence. Drivers stepped out first, scanning, then the man in white linen. Even from a distance, he looked like a decision. Jessica, whispered Shalola, following her gaze. Who is? My father, Jessica breathed, the words gusting from her as if she had been holding them in all morning. She snapped the lunchbox shut as if that could shut the future. He doesn't usually come without telling anyone. They stood. Standing did not help. The security man, yesterday's compromise, hovered, uncertain which loyalty his job required. The principal materialized, her smile practiced to bloom at the exact angle his shadow preferred. They spoke a moment in low tones that meant important people were arranging the mood of the room. Then Chief Agu's eyes swept the lawn and found what he hadn't known he was looking for. His daughter beneath a mango tree with a barefoot girl who did not know where to hide her hands. Jessica! His voice did not shout, it carried. Staff stilled. A small flock of boys switched from play to surveillance. Jessica took a breath that felt like kneeling. Sir, she called, and for a second she looked younger than her uniform. He walked toward them without haste, which was worse. When he reached the tree, he did not acknowledge the mango shade or the way it had been sheltering miracles. He looked at the two girls as if calculating an answer and deciding whether to accept it. He addressed his daughter first. Who is your friend? He asked, and he did not put the word in quotes, which should have been a mercy and felt like a test. Jessica's hand found Skolola's and squeezed. In apology, in courage, in something like both. This is Skolola, she said. She's been helping me. He turned to the other child and took her in, not with the lazy cruelty of those who mistake poverty for a story about bad choices, but with the focus of a man who had learned that details are the difference between profit and loss. He saw the dust on her calves, the careful hair, the washed dress that could not forget its stains. He saw a nylon bag held like a thesis. He saw fear in the eyes and something else beneath. Refusal. You've been helping my daughter, he repeated, not a question. Yes, sir, said Skolola, and the sir was an instinct she did not know how to mute. She is very smart. She just needed someone to listen to how her brain talks. A corner of his mouth did something not quite visible and then returned to order. You are in school? No, sir. Why not? My mother is sick. There is no money. Sick how? The sentence looked for a shore. She speaks to things that aren't there. Some days she knows me. Some days she thinks I stole her wings. Jessica flinched at the last image. Her father did not. How old are you? He asked. 12, said Skolola, and felt the number like a small badge people would not stop asking to see. And your father? I do not know him. The principal shifted. The security man studied the grass. The world waited for the man in white linen to decide which story he was in. A scandal, a sermon, or a meeting that should have been an email. Show me where you live, said Chief Agu. Jessica blinked. Daddy! Now, he said quietly. There are commands that flatten space between a person and a car. The afternoon reassembled around motion. Lunchboxes abandoned. A dozen whispers blooming in the wake. A corridor of curiosity forming as they crossed the lawn. The mango tree kept its counsel. In the rearview mirror, its leaves made a green promise nobody heard. The convoy left manicured hedges for roads that have learned to carry misery without complaint. The city changed registers as they drove. Glass to plywood, stone to tin, perfume to smoke. At mile 12, the SUVs became an event. Faces turned not in accusation but in assessment. What has come? Who will it touch? Does it leave anything behind that can be folded into tomorrow? Here, said Skolola, pointing at a wall whose paint had chosen surrender. She climbed from the car with the nervous grace of someone stepping onto a stage she did not audition for. Mommy? Abini sat on the ground with her feet bare, and her dignity doing what dignity does, refusing to discuss the matter. She was humming to a breeze, coaxing it to become music. Her wrapper sagged. Her hair was a tangle of old afternoons. When she looked up and saw strangers, surprise tripped, fell, and turned into laughter. You again, she told the air. You took my wings. Bring them back. Jessica's fingers dug into her father's linen. He unwound them gently and walked forward alone. He did not change his expression because switching faces seemed disrespectful. He knelt, and the smallness of that movement did something to the crowd. Noise dulled. Flies spun their tight orbits. Madam, he said, and the respect shared the weight with her. We came to help. Help? Said Abini, suspicious and delighted. Help is for angels. Are you an angel? She reached and tapped his shoulder to test for feathers. Cloth. I am a father, he said simply. And this is your daughter? My daughter flew away, she sang, as if announcing the weather. Mommy, said Skolola, kneeling now too, their knees almost touching. It's me. Sometimes illness is a fog with clearings. The wind shifted, grass bent. For a heartbeat, a woman who had been held hostage stepped to the window. She looked at the girl kneeling there with breadcrumb eyes and made a sound that might have been a name. Then the fog flowed back and carried her away. She clapped at the trick. See? Fast plane. Jessica pressed the back of her wrist to her mouth. The part of her that spent afternoons under mango leaves understood, suddenly and forever, that some storms cannot be feared into leaving. They have to be loved into changing shape. Chief Agu rose. He had the phone in his hand before the decision finished forming in his chest. Dr. Aisha, he said when the line clicked. Emergency intake. Female, mid-30s. Acute psychosis. Likely chronic. Yes, now. He began arranging a world in which help had a short commute. Ambulance. Bed. Paperwork that wouldn't dare delay. He nodded as he listened, his face turning into the kind of map other people used to navigate. "Sir," said Skalola, standing very straight, "please don't hurt her. She is gentle. When she speaks to angels, she is not making trouble." "We are not here to hurt anyone," he said. He looked down at her, the child who had taught his daughter the trick of listening to sense and not noise, and let a softness show. "We are here to make her well." The ambulance came, improbable and exact. It made a red light of the slum, and for a few minutes everyone's eyes reflected the same color. The paramedics moved with the respect of people who know bodies, tell stories they are tired of repeating. They spoke to Abini as if she could come back at any word. They asked permission. She granted it like a queen on benevolent days. When they lifted her, the wrapper tried to fall. A woman from the crowd stepped forward and fixed it, adjusting cloth and pride with equal skill. Then lights and diesel and a siren learning how to sound hopeful. The ambulance left. Dust and whispers stayed. The daughter watched until the last flash turned a corner. She stood very still, an arrow quivering after release. "You will come," said Chief Agu, not asking. It was unclear if he meant to the hospital or to a future. Possibly both. He gestured and a door opened. The car swallowed them again. They drove to the hospital where money made hallways clean and silence disciplined. Forms appeared and were filled by assistants who had been trained to write fast without writing wrong. Dr. Aisha materialized with the kind of calm that proves itself every day. "We will stabilize her first," she said, after a brief examination that looked like listening. "Medication, sleep, a place where her mind can stop running. Then we will see what pieces ask to be put back." "Is she fixable?" Jessica whispered, feeling like a thief for wanting yes. "She is a person," said Dr. Aisha. "We do not fix people. We help them live better with the weather inside them." Perhaps seeing the panic not drain from Jessica's face, she softened. "We will help, and that will help you." In the corridor, away from antiseptic and clatter, Chief Agu looked at the girl who wasn't his and heard a sentence in his head he had not known he was preparing to say. It came out quieter than he expected, which made it heavier. "From today," he said, "you do not sleep under billboards." Shkalola stared, unable to sit the words down where she could see all of them at once. "You will come home with us," he continued. "We will see about school, about everything." "Sir," she said, because Papa was a mountain she had not practiced climbing. He shook his head. "No more sir from you. If you cannot say the other word yet, then say my name, but do not say sir." Jessica's hand found Shalola's again. "You'll come," she said, eyes brilliant, as if someone had turned on a light inside her skull and it was shining out her face. "Please." The girl thought of a mango tree and leaf quarters, in sentences made humble. She thought of a woman with a storm behind her eyes finally sleeping without dreaming of flight. She thought of gates that had learned her name only to forget it. She thought of a uniform that might someday remember her body. She thought of a promise. "We are family," carved small enough to be missed by anyone not looking. "Yes," she said. It wasn't loud, but it was the loudest she had ever been. The drive to the mansion felt like traveling across chapters. The gate opened the way certain doors open when people have decided you belong before you learn how to. The floors were the exact opposite of market concrete. The air smelled like a vocabulary word she didn't know yet. Lavender. Staff paused, surprised not because a child had come through a rich man's door, but because she walked as if doing so did not require apology. "This is my sister," Jessica announced with the indiscretion of joy. "Her name is Skalola." The man in white linen nodded once to the room, and the room rearranged itself to include a new center. They gave her a bathroom, and she learned a miracle as ordinary as hot water. They gave her a towel, and it was thick enough to feel like a small cloud consenting to touch her. They gave her clothes that were not arguing with their seams. They gave her a bed. She sat on its edge and touched the mattress with the reverence she had never used on altars. What is the word for lying down without planning how to wake up before the police do? She would learn it. She would add it to the book Auntie Linda had told her to keep filling with the names of what she could become. Later, when the house was quieter and doors had practiced closing without slamming, Jessica slipped into her room with a bundle in her arms. She unfolded a uniform, crisp as a new sentence. The stitching on the collar read, "Queen's Crest International." Beneath it, smaller, careful, miraculous. Skolola agu. We guessed the size, Jessica said, pretending casual as if this were simply administrative. We can change it if it pinches. Skolola touched the letters, the way you touch a door you dreamed last night and found this morning. Is it allowed? She whispered. It is decided, said a voice from the doorway. Her, what word? Her benefactor, her possibility, her not yet papa. He did not step in. He let the threshold do the talking. Sleep. Tomorrow we buy books. Books. The word built a cathedral inside her. She looked at the uniform again and thought of a mango leaf torn into equal parts. Make them match, she had said. Perhaps this was how lives learned to speak the same language, not by pretending to be identical, but by agreeing on a denominator called dignity. That night, lying in a bed that did not know her yet but seemed willing to learn, she whispered to the ceiling, "Thank you." And then, because the habit was older than this house and would follow her wherever she went, I will use it. I will not waste it. I will be a room that holds. Somewhere across the city, a woman with a mind like weather slept under watchful eyes. Somewhere under a tree, initials carved small held the bark together. Somewhere in a mansion, a man remembered his own mango tree and the boy he had been under it, and understood why the day had chosen him. Tomorrow would bring uniforms and schedules and stairs. Tonight brought a bed and a decision, and both were miracles. Morning taught her a new verb, belong. It began with a uniform that knew her name. The fabric was stiff, the collar too formal for a girl whose throat was used to swallowing dust. But as Shalola traced the stitched letters one last time, Shalola agu, she felt the thread tug something inside her into place. Jessica hovered in the doorway, impatient with excitement, a ribbon clenched in her teeth like a sailor with a knife. Turn around, she commanded, already reaching for a comb. If the head mistress doesn't faint when she sees you, then she's stronger than I thought. I don't want anyone to faint, said Shkolola, laughing despite the small tremor in her chest. You're right, Jessica said, executing a decisive braid. I want them to applaud. Downstairs, breakfast happened the way it does in houses that believe days can be orchestrated, plates that matched, fruit that tasted like it had gone to finishing school, staff who slid in and out of doorways with practiced invisibility. Chief Agu folded his paper when they entered. He looked at his daughter, then at the girl whose life had curled around theirs like a rescued vine seeking a trellis. You'll do well, he said. It wasn't encouragement, it was prophecy. The driver waited. The gates opened like a sentence convinced of its subject. The city moved from mansion to market and back to school, changing accents along the way. At Queen's Crest, heads turned before car doors fully shut. Whisper traveled faster than air conditioning. Isn't that the street girl? No, that's... Look at the name, Agu. Skolola kept her eyes level. The rules had changed, but her spine remembered both worlds. Jessica walked beside her with a deliberately ordinary stride, as if the trick to moving through wonder was to pretend it was familiar. At assembly, the principal's smile tightened a notch, then found sincerity. We welcome a new student, she announced, and the microphone made the word welcome public, a contract more binding than almost anything else that had ever been said to Skolola. There were claps. A few were polite, a few were curious, more than she feared were kind. The first class was mathematics. The teacher, Mr. Aid, whose tie executed a different geometry every day, called on her by instinct, the way teachers test new names for weight. Find the lowest common multiple, he said, and chalk wrote a tangle on the board that would have given the old Jessica a headache and the old Skolola a perfect, secret thrill behind a fence. 12, she said, and when asked how, she showed, not quickly to impress, but clearly to invite. By the time she finished, the chalk had turned obedient, and even the children who liked to hide behind sighs had leaned forward. English followed. The passage wanted to be admired. She made it humane. The author is lonely, she said when asked for tone. Not sad exactly. Lonely like a new house before furniture. Mr. Aid's eyebrows auditioned for new heights. Good, he said, and the room wrote good in their margins and pretended not to. By lunch, the day had shifted from scrutiny to pattern. They ate beneath the mango tree because a miracle shouldn't move just because you got permission. The security man tipped his cap, relieved perhaps that the story had chosen a happy genre. Jessica unpacked the lunchbox and half an hour of laughter. They reviewed a concept. They invented a reward. If comprehension answers earned full marks, they would put a ribbon on the tree's lowest branch, a small festival of victory. Soon this place will look like a shop that sells joy, Jessica declared. Then business will be good, said Shalola. After school, the driver took them not home but to the hospital. The building smelled like effort. Dr. Aisha met them with the kind of calm that has no interest in performance. She is resting more, she said. Medication is beginning to make friends with her brain. They entered the ward. Through the window, the sky was the exact blue of a new book cover. A beanie sat in a chair by the light like a queen on a quieter day. When she saw them, she did not speak in dreams. She blinked and then smiled. Small, real. My daughter, she said. The words found their coastline. They landed. I'm here, said Shalola, kneeling. Her fingers wrapped around her mother's. They were warm. They did not fidget for invisible strings. You look like school, said Abini, head tipping the way it did when a song almost remembered its own lyrics. I am school, said Skolola. She didn't mean it arrogantly. She meant it like gratitude, a statement of fact the world had finally allowed to be true. They talked in short lines, a few details about lunch, a description of a nurse who laughed like bells, the weather inside and out. When a cloud of fog drifted across her mother's gaze, they waited together for the window to clear again. Dr. Aisha stayed silent nearby, the way good doctors do when a family stitches something fragile and does not need help. Back in the car, Jessica stared out at the city with a new kind of attention. I used to think broken things needed fixing, she said softly. Now I think they need care. Sometimes care is the fix, said her father. Sometimes care is the bridge, said Shalola, between what a person is and what they can become. That evening, Chief Agu asked her to come to the study. The room smelled like books that had never been bored, leather that had learned patience, wood that understood the weight of decisions. He gestured to a chair, then remained standing, as if the posture would carry what he was about to say further. I grew up under a tree, he began, surprising himself by telling the story out loud. My mother sold peppers. I used to pretend the road was a blackboard. People gave me names I refused to wear. I wasn't always kind about that refusal. He looked toward the window, but his attention was elsewhere. A teacher found me, a man with clean shoes who didn't mind getting them dusty. He put a book in my hand and said, "You are not where you are. You are who you are." I promised that if I ever had enough, I would pull someone else onto the dry ground. Money has a way of making you forget your promises, especially the oldest ones. When I saw you under that tree, he stopped, searching for an unfrivolous word. It reminded me. He turned back, present again. You have done more for my daughter than I paid a school full of professionals to do. He spread his hands as if presenting a ledger with only one entry. If you want it, your education is now my business. Tutors, books, exams, whatever letters you want after your name. If you want architecture, I will introduce you to the people who make cities think. If you want to teach, I will build the rooms you fill. If you want both, we will learn a language that lets them hold hands. Skolola's throat prickled with heat. I don't know how to thank you. Don't, he said. Thank me by becoming the person who would have found you, even if I hadn't. She nodded because she had already promised a version of that to a billboard and a bar of soap, and a woman who boarded a plane with a heart heavy and hopeful. Weeks became a habit of excellence. The first exam results landed like small fireworks. A's that did not crow because they had been earned in silence. Jessica's grades rose beside them. Loyalty crystallized into competence. Teachers stopped looking startled when answers came from Jessica's row. They started calling on her because they knew she had something to add. On Saturdays, after visiting the hospital, they returned to the mango tree. Younger students found them now, a small flock with uneven shoelaces and big hungry eyes, the good kind of hunger. Can you help? A boy asked, thrusting a workbook toward them like an offering. I don't understand. Sit, said Shalola, and realized she had used the voice of every teacher she had loved, even the ones who had not known they were teaching her. Jessica passed around biscuits like punctuation marks, comas that let everyone breathe. They taught fractions with bottle tops, comprehension with stories that preferred truth over grammar. They clapped for small victories. They sent the children away with a sentence each to take home. Make them match first. Ask what the sentence is trying to do. You are not a mistake. You are a draft. A ribbon tree blossomed at their backs. Proof of passages conquered, of panic tamed. The security man pretended not to see the color slowly invading his tidy lawn. When anyone asked, he said the grounds were not being vandalized. They were being decorated by improvement. The day the hospital discharged a beanie to a nearby supervised home, the sky wore the exact blue of a yes. She walked more slowly than a wish, but steadier than a fear. Sometimes she forgot the hour, but she remembered faces more often now. And when she forgot, she didn't panic. She left a space where memory could return, and it often did. She had learned a new sentence from Dr. Aisha. I will come back to that, and used it on her thoughts with gentle authority. Soon, she told her daughter softly on a bench outside, I will sit in the shade and listen to you read a whole book. Soon, said Shalola, and for once the word did not sound like a bribe to the future. That night the house held a quiet celebration. No reporters, no speeches, just stew that tasted like a grandmother's blessing and laughter that landed where it meant to. Jessica pinned a ribbon to the mango tree in the garden, their first tree, the one that had watched the convoy leave and the girl return. For what? Asked her father, amused. For everything, said Jessica. Later, when the house exhaled and the city turned down its volume, Shalola walked into the garden alone. The tree heaved the soft sigh trees make at night. She pressed her palm to the bark where S+J hid like a secret that had learned how to live in the open. A breeze moved, nudging leaves into a quiet argument with the moon. Thank you, she whispered, for the billboard and the bar of soap, for the woman who fed her before she had a reason, for the guard who looked away at the right time, for the teacher who asked the next question, for the man who remembered his promise before forgetting finished its work, for the friend who said sister and meant it. She thought of the children who had started to gather at lunchtime, the way their faces unfolded when a problem finally let go. She thought of roofs that could be built to hold both rain and reading. She thought of the word architect and the word teacher, and how between them lay a road she could pave with attention. I won't waste it, she said into the leaves. I will be a room that holds. I will be a bridge. I will be a tree when there is no building yet. The wind answered by moving through the branches like a choir warming up. Inside, a lamp clicked off. Somewhere across town, a woman slept and dreamed not of wings stolen, but of doors opening. In a file on a rich man's desk, applications began to gather. Names of other children the world had failed to see. The mango tree, being a tree, did not applaud. It simply stood, rooted in two stories that had become one, and kept the shade generous. Morning would come, and with it more work. Equations to befriend, sentences to invite, systems to argue with until they moved. But for a long, soft moment in the dark, a girl who had learned to learn under fences, let gratitude be her homework, and felt, down to the bones that had once stood in gutters, that this was not the end of anything. It was the first clean page after the title.